A simple way to remember the difference between PTSD and moral injury is that PTSD is often about survival, and moral injury is an injury of conscience. Something inside me no longer feels whole. Welcome to the First Responder Families podcast, sponsored by Shatterproof at FHE Health, a nationally recognized behavioral health provider. I am your host, Ivona Bhadha, a director of family services at FHE Health and a family, couples, and trauma therapist. Join me for meaningful conversations and talks that support wellness and mental health of first responders and their families. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the First Responder Families podcast. I'm Ivona Bhadha, a licensed clinical therapist, trauma therapist, and director of family services at FHE Health for the Shatterproof First Responder program. For more than 25 years, I have had the privilege of working with individuals and families healing from trauma, addiction, and mental health challenges. Over the past several years, my work has become deeply focused on first responders and, just as importantly, the families who stand beside them every day. I'm so grateful you have joined us because this month we are beginning a very special educational mini-series called The Human Behind the Hero. Every day, first responders run towards emergencies while the rest of us run away. They make split-second decisions under impossible circumstances. They witness tragedy, loss, violence, and human suffering that most people will never encounter in a lifetime. We often recognize the physical dangers of these professions. We talk about traumatic events, critical events, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-traumatic stress injury. We understand that repeated exposure to crises can take a psychological toll. But there is another kind of wound that often goes unseen, a wound that leaves no scar, a wound that many first responders carry silently for years because they cannot quite find words for it. That wound is called moral injury. So let me begin with a story. Imagine you are dispatched to a devastating crash. When you arrive, there are multiple victims. Resources are limited. You have only enough personnel to save one person immediately. People are critically injured. You know that every second counts. No matter what decision you make, someone may die. You make the best choice you can with the information you have. Your team tells you that you did everything right. Your supervisors agree. Protocols were followed. Your training was sound. But weeks later, maybe even years later, months later, you're still asking yourself, did I choose the right person? Could I have done something differently? Did I fail someone that day? No one accuses you. No one blames you. Yet, you begin to carry the weight of that moment inside yourself. Or imagine another scenario. You respond to a call involving a child. You arrive too late. Despite every effort, You cannot save them. You know intellectually that this was beyond your control. But emotionally, your heart whispers something very difficult. I should have done more. I couldn't protect them. How can I continue doing this work? These experiences don't simply create fear. They create something deeper. They challenge a person's sense of who they are. They shake their beliefs about their own goodness, justice, responsibility, loyalty, or even faith. This is the heart of moral injury. Unlike PTSD, which is primarily rooted in fear and survival, moral injury develops when someone experiences, witnesses, or participates in events that violate their deeply held moral beliefs or values. It may arise from something they did, something they were unable to do, or something they witnessed, or even something they were ordered to do. Many first responders tell me they don't necessarily feel afraid when they remember these moments. Instead, they feel guilt, shame, grief, anger, and rage, a sense of betrayal, or a profound sense that a part of themselves was lost. Over time, when unattended, these invisible wounds can begin to shape how they see themselves, how they connect with loved ones, and how they experience the world. Some become emotionally numb. Others withdraw from family. Some struggles with irritability, depression, substance use, or overwhelming self-criticism. Many continue performing their jobs exceptionally well and while quietly carrying an invisible burden that no one else can see. That's why this conversation matters, because moral injury is often misunderstood. It is frequently hidden beneath symptoms that look like burnout, depression, PTSD, or addiction. But beneath those symptoms often lives a person who is not asking, what's wrong with me? They are asking, how do I live with what I have experienced? And perhaps even more importantly, they're asking, am I still a good person? If you have ever asked yourself those questions, or you have watched someone you love struggle with them, I hope you'll stay with us throughout this exploration. Because understanding moral injury is often the first step towards healing it. This moral injury isn't fear. It is wounded sense of self, conscience. Now that we understand what moral injury is, it's important to talk about something that often creates confusion. Many people ask, isn't this just PTSD? The answer is sometimes they occur together, but they are not same thing. Both are invisible wounds. Both can be profoundly affecting someone's life and family. Both can be self-medicated by withdrawal into isolation or drugs, alcohol. But they develop for different reasons and often require different paths towards healing. Post-traumatic stress disorder is primarily a fear-based injury. It develops after experiencing or witnessing life-threatening events. The brain becomes conditioned to stay on high alert, consistently and constantly scanning for danger, even when the danger has passed. People with PTSD may experience flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, startle responses, panic, and avoidance of reminder of the trauma. At its core, PTSD asks the question, am I safe? And mostly the answer is never safe enough. And the nervous system always sends the signals for protection and hypervigilance. Moral injury asks a very different question. It develops when someone feels they have violated or witnessed the violation of their deepest moral beliefs. Instead of fear, the dominant emotions are guilt, shame, betrayal, anger, grief, loss of trust, a spiritual or existential distress. The question becomes, can I live with what happened? Or even deeper, am I still a good person? This is why someone can survive countless dangerous situations without developing PTSD, yet be devastated by a single event that violated everything they believed was right. A simple way to remember the difference between PTSD and moral injury is that PTSD is often about survival, and moral injury is an injury of conscience. Something inside me no longer feels whole. Let's break it down into some examples. I learned from veterans that the deepest wound isn't always the terrifying moments they survived. Often it is the moments that challenge everything they believed about themselves, humanity, or what is right. You know, a police officer, for example, after the call involving abused children, inside, he replaced the moment over and over, asking himself whether another choice existed. Many firefighters carry the quiet burden of asking, why wasn't I faster? What if I had chosen a different entrance? Could I have saved them? Emergency medical personnel frequently make life and death decisions within seconds. Sometimes there are not enough resources, not enough time. Sometimes families beg for miracles that cannot be simply provided. And EMTs may carry invisible questions, sometimes for weeks and months after the event. Did I miss something? Did I make the right decision? Could someone still be alive if I had acted differently? And also, dispatchers often experience moral injury in silence. They hear a lot and they cannot physically intervene. Many describe feeling helpless while carrying tremendous responsibility. Even though they did everything correctly, they often wonder, did I ask the right question? Did I send help quickly enough? Could I have saved that person? Let's imagine correctional officers. What I know from them, they face unique moral dilemmas nearly every day. Then some carry the burden of wondering whether they missed warning signs before an inmate died. These experiences can deeply challenge a person's sense of justice, compassion, and professional identity. Sometimes the painful source of moral injury isn't a single traumatic event, but something that happens inside of the organization. Researchers call this organizational betrayal. My experience is that our first responders who come for intensive treatment, they have been supported by their peer support, by their teams and agencies. And it's not always the case. Sometimes first responders feel abandoned by their team or supervisors after a critical incident, or they feel blamed. And their pain may sound like, I no longer know who I can trust. I lost the trust that this organization, this agency would stand by me. And so let's explore the impact of the moral injury phenomenon. Perhaps the deepest impact of moral injury isn't simply emotional, but touches on the one's identity and also on their relational health with families. Many first responders don't just do this work, they become it. Being a firefighter, being a deputy, being an EMT, being a combat veteran, being a correctional officer, being a dispatcher. They become part of identity. When moral injury occurs, people often begin questioning who they are. I don't recognize the person I have become, they may say. I used to believe I was making a difference. This loss of identity can become incredibly isolating because the outside world often sees only the hero. Sometimes the cynical part of them comes online, and yet it masks the pain of losing the motivation and faith in humanity. And there is the ripple effect at home. Moral injury rarely stays at work. It often follows first responders home, partners, may notice someone becoming emotionally distant. Children may sense increased irritability or emotional withdrawal. Family members often assume, oh, they are just tired. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they are carrying experiences they cannot or they don't want to put into words. Many first responders stay silent because they believe that talking about these experiences will burden the people they love, or because they fear they simply won't understand. Unfortunately, silence often creates even greater distance. And over time, families may interpret withdrawal as rejection. In reality, the first responder may be carrying profound guilt, grief, or shame they don't know how to express. And actually, those are very difficult states to put into words. And those emotions, when they are overwhelming, they themselves, shut the nervous system down, and people don't reach out, for help, for conversation, for what they need, the understanding. Understanding moral injury helps families realize that what they are witnessing is often not a lack of love or care. It is an invisible wound. People forget that they were human beings placed in impossible situations, carrying impossible choices, and instead judge themselves as if they should have been superhuman. Moral injury often convinces people that one terrible moment defines them forever. But invisible wounds deserve the same compassion, understanding, and treatment as visible ones. If you are listening today as a spouse, partner, parent, sibling, or close friend of a first responder, I want to speak directly to you. One of the hardest parts about moral injury is that it often doesn't look like pain. It may look like anger. It may look like emotional distance. It may look like someone who suddenly doesn't want to go out anymore, who spends more time alone, who seems emotionally numb, or who becomes easily irritated or often drunk. It is easy to assume they are shutting me out. They don't care anymore. They are becoming someone I don't recognize. But often what's happening underneath is something very different. Many first responders struggling with moral injury, and they are not thinking, I don't love my family. They are thinking, my family deserves someone better than me. That is a heartbreaking difference, and that's the hidden brain of moral injury. When shame enters the picture, people just organically pull away. Shame is that kind of emotion that shuts people down. Not because they don't love the people closest to them, but because they no longer believe they deserve that love. That's the language and the the essence of shame. This is where family members can make an incredible difference, not by fixing the pain, but by creating a safe place where it doesn't have to be carried alone. If you are wondering what to say, here are a few tips. Instead of saying you need to let it go, which would be for all of us maybe a default comment, try saying, I can see how much this still weighs on your heart. Also, instead of you did everything right, again, another default response, try this. Tell me what has been hardest for you about what happened. And also, instead of just stop blaming yourself. It wasn't your fault. Try this. I wonder if you have been carrying this alone for a very long time. So, in other words, instead of trying to convince them that they are wrong, become curious, become present, become compassionate. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't advice. It's your willingness to stay with difficult, which it is difficult to witness someone blaming themselves, to stay with them while they tell their story. Their story. It is not about the details of the scene or event. You can actually help them to start healing, to focus more on them and ask this question, for example. What has this experience meant you believe about yourself? That question gently shifts the conversation from the event itself to the meaning they have attached to it. And often that's where healing begins. If your loved one answers that question with a painful belief, painful negative belief like, I have failed, I am a terrible person, I should have done more. Your first job is not to change their mind. Your first job is simply to stay present. Listen without rushing to reassure them. Resist the urge to immediately say, that's not true. Instead, let them know you hear their pain. You might say, thank you for trusting me with that. That sounds incredibly heavy to carry. I'm here with you. Sometimes being deeply hurt without judgment or pressure to feel better is healing in itself. If the moment feels right, you might also gently ask, have you ever heard of something called moral injury? Many first responders have never heard the term, yet it finally gives a name to what they have been carrying. Simply understanding that there is an explanation for these painful beliefs can begin to loosen their grip. Most importantly, offer a hope. Moral injury is not a life sentence. Healing is possible. At FHE Health, at Shatterproof program, intense treatment for first responders, I have witnessed this transformation again and again. I and our team, we have seen first responders who believed they were beyond redemption. They began to reconnect with their own humanity. I have watched them challenge the painful beliefs they carried about themselves, rebuild trust in their own judgment, reconnect with others, and discover that their stories do not have to end with shame. Today, we have evidence-based therapies that specifically help people heal these deeply rooted wounds. Treatments such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, internal family systems, IFS therapy, trauma-informed group therapy alongside other first responders who truly understand, and neuroscience-based neurorehabilitation approaches all support what researchers call memory reconciliation, the brain's remarkable ability to update old painful memories with new experiences of safety, compassion, and self-trust. Healing doesn't erase what happened. It changes what you believe about yourself because of what happened. It reminds me a great quote by relationship expert and author David Rico. Forgiveness is forgetting in spite of remembering. I think the spiritual treatment for moral injury is self-forgiveness. And using this quote would be self-forgiveness is forgetting the shaming messages, the loss of self and trust in yourself and humanity. But there is still remembrance of the event. So self-forgiveness, it asks you to stop using what happened as evidence that you are unworthy of love, belonging, or peace. I'll say it again. Self-forgiveness is asking you to stop using what happened as evidence that you are unworthy of love, belonging, or peace. Because healing and personal growth and post-traumatic growth means remembering the event while releasing the belief that you are no longer a good human being. It's courageous work of coming home to yourself. Yeah, just like words of mindfulness and spiritual teacher Jack Cornfield reminds us, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. And I'll share that again. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it. Treatment of moral injury is marked by integrating the experience into your life without allowing it to define your worth. As the author and researcher Brené Brown reminds us, shame cannot survive being spoken. It cannot survive empathy. That is why healing almost always happens in relationship with skilled therapists, trusted peers, supportive and empathetic family members, and communities who understand the weight first responders carry. One of my favorite quotes comes from psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived unimaginable suffering at concentration camp. And he said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. If you are a family member listening today, your role matters more than you may realize. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to convince your loved one that everything will be okay and they are good enough. Often the greatest gift you can offer is your presence. When your loved one says, "I failed," resist the urge to immediately argue or reassure. Instead, gently ask, "Can you tell me more about what makes you feel that way?" Stay curious, stay compassionate, listen without trying to fix. Healing begins simply because someone finally feels safe enough to tell the whole story. And if your loved one is carrying overwhelming guilt or shame, you might gently introduce the idea that what they are experiencing could have a name: moral injury. Knowing there is a name for their pain often brings tremendous relief. Most importantly, remind them over and over again that help is available. There is healing, there is hope. We have seen countless first responders rebuilding their lives after believing that they never could. And no one, including you family members, no one has to walk this road alone. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with a first responder, a spouse, a family member, or a colleague. Sometimes a single exploration, can become the first step towards healing. And if you are listening today, carrying a burden that feels too heavy to bear, please remember this: you are not broken. There is hope and there is healing. And don't believe everything you think. Reach out. You deserve it. Many first responders discover that after healing, after treatment, they become even more present spouses, parents, leaders, and friends. They begin to live with greater authenticity because they no longer have to hide behind the mask of perfection or behind mask of I'm okay, I'm fine. So this is what psychologists sometimes call post-traumatic growth, the possibility that even after profound suffering, people can emerge with deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, greater resilience, and renewed purpose. It does not erase the pain, but it reminds us that pain doesn't have the last final word. Until next time, my friends, take care of yourself and take care of one another. Thank you for tuning in. The First Responder Families podcast is sponsored by Shadowproof at FHE Health, a specialized treatment program for first responders with mental health and/or substance use issues. For more information about our show and our services, check out FHEHealth.com. The podcast website also has a place where you can share your ideas or questions for future shows. If you are struggling, we want to help. Feel free to call us at 844-714-3403 or visit FHEHealth.com. We look forward to having you join us for our podcast next month. Until then, take care.